What if the life you've lived was a lie? For 70 years, Eleanor Vance believed her story was written. A quiet widow, a loving grandmother, a woman who had made peace with the ghost of a tragic first love. But we're told that time heals all wounds, aren't we? That's a comforting lie we tell ourselves. The truth is, some secrets don't die. They just wait. In a dusty attic, tucked within a false bottom of a trunk, Eleanor finds a letter. A 50-year-old message from the man she thought was gone forever. It's not a love note, but an accusation, revealing a secret so monumental it detonates the very foundation of her existence. She didn't just lose a love, she lost a son. Now armed with a truth that redefines her past and shatters her present, Eleanor must embark on one last desperate quest. This isn't just a journey to find the family she never knew she had. It's a dangerous excavation of a life built on betrayal, forcing her to confront the question, can you reclaim a destiny that was stolen from you before you even knew it was yours? The attic smelled of cedar and forgotten time, a scent Eleanor had always associated with endings. At 70, she moved with a careful slowness, sorting through the ghosts of a life neatly packed away in dusty trunks. Each item, from a chipped porcelain doll to her husband's old service medals, was a closed chapter, a story already told. The deep sense of nostalgia was a warm but heavy blanket. She believed her own story was in its final pages, a quiet epilogue of tea, gardening, and fading memories. Little did she know, the universe wasn't quite done with her. She ran her hand along the worn leather of her mother's old travel trunk, a relic from a life lived more boldly than her own. As her fingers traced the faded lining, they snagged on a loose thread near the bottom. A gentle pull revealed not just frayed silk but a false bottom, a secret compartment she never knew existed. Inside, nestled in yellow tissue paper, was a small stack of handwritten letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were addressed to her, in a familiar, elegant script that made her breath catch in her throat, a script she hadn't seen in 50 years. His name was Arthur, her first love, her only real lost love, the boy with eyes the color of the sea and a laugh that could chase away any storm. They were torn apart by circumstance, a classic tale of war and missed connections that she had buried deep within her heart. This discovery felt like a violation, a ghost rattling its chains in the quiet house of her soul. She thought she had made peace with that past, but seeing his handwriting was like a jolt of lightning, reigniting a faint hope she thought had long since died, the fragile dream of a second chance at love. Her hands, now trembling, untied the brittle ribbon. Most of the letters were worn, clearly read and reread, but one at the very bottom was different. It was still sealed, the wax stamp of a songbird unbroken after half a century. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a mix of terror and exhilarating curiosity. With a deep breath, she broke the seal and unfolded the crisp paper, her eyes scanning the 50-year-old ink. But this wasn't a love note or a simple farewell. It was a desperate plea that ended with a single, soul-shattering question. Eleanor, why did you never come to get our son? The world tilted on its axis, the attic's dusty air suddenly thin and unbreathable. Our son, 2 words, a universe of meaning. The handwritten letter in her trembling hands was no longer a relic of a lost love. It was an indictment, a 50-year-old ghost pointing a finger of accusation. Eleanor sank onto a nearby trunk, the brittle paper crinkling under her grip. Her mind, a fortress of carefully curated memories, was being dismantled brick by brick. Every memory of her mother was now cast in a sinister new light, every story a potential lie. She forced herself to read the words again, searching for a mistake, a trick of the light. But Arthur's script was clear, his pain palpable across the decades. He wrote of a small cottage by the sea, a place they were meant to meet, a place he waited with their child. The letter was a testament to his faith in her, in their shared destiny, a faith she had unknowingly shattered. This simple piece of paper held a devastating power, proving that the deepest connections and the deepest wounds could be carried across a lifetime, waiting for the right moment to surface and demand a reckoning. The dream of a sweet late in life. Romance curdled into a nightmare of unanswered questions. How could this have happened? Why was she never told? The quiet grief she had carried for Arthur was now a roaring inferno of confusion and betrayal. The gentle nostalgia of the attic had become a torture chamber, each object a silent witness to the monumental secret that had defined her life without her knowledge. The possibility of reconnecting with Arthur now carried an impossible weight, the weight of a life she was never allowed to live. Her gaze fell back to the opened letter, her eyes catching on a slight bulge in the envelope she'd missed in her initial shock. With fumbling fingers, she reached inside and pulled out a small square photograph, its edges softened by time. It was Arthur. His familiar smile now tinged with a sorrow she finally understood. He was holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, a child with a serious face and her own unmistakable emerald eyes. On the back, in faded ink, was a name, Samuel, and a chillingly simple instruction: "He's still waiting for you." The photograph of Samuel was a ghost in her hand, a tangible piece of a life she never knew she'd lost. All the what-ifs she had carefully packed away over the years came rushing back, no longer hypotheticals but brutal, sharp-edged reality. This wasn't just about a lost love. It was about a stolen motherhood, a whole branch of her family tree sawed off before it could even grow. She realized with a gut-wrenching certainty that her entire adult life had been a detour, a long, quiet road taken because the map her mother gave her was missing the most important destination of all. Her grief for her mother soured into a cold, hard anger. How could the woman who taught her honesty have orchestrated such a monumental lie? Eleanor's mind raced, re-examining old memories. Searching for cracks in the facade, she remembered her mother's strange insistence they never summer in the coastal towns, her vague excuses about painful memories. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed prison to keep Eleanor from her own destiny. This was more than a secret. It was a theft of a lifetime, leaving a mountain of unfinished business between a daughter and her mother's ghost, staring at the face of the son she never met. Eleanor felt a shift deep within her soul. The passive sorrow of a widow was replaced by the fierce protective instinct of a mother. She wouldn't let this be the end of the story. The quiet life of one of the town's respected seniors was over. A quest had just begun. Finding peace wasn't about forgetting the past anymore. It was about excavating it. No matter how painful the process might be, she had to find him. She had to know if Arthur was still out there. The hope of reconnecting was a terrifying, brilliant flame in the darkness, driven by a new, urgent purpose. She began tearing through her mother's trunk, searching for anything: a diary, an address book, a clue. At the very bottom, beneath a folded wedding veil, she found a small locked metal box. It was cold to the touch. After a frantic search, she found the key hidden in the spine of her mother's old Bible. With a click, the lock sprang open. It didn't contain letters or photos, but stacks of bank withdrawal slips and a single, folded, yellowed newspaper clipping from 1975. It was an obituary, not for Arthur but for his older brother, and the cause of death sent a new wave of ice through her veins. Drowned in a boating accident. The word drowned was a stone dropping into the deep well of her newfound hope and silencing it completely, just as she'd found a thread back to her lost love. It seemed destiny had cruelly snapped it decades ago. The fragile, foolish dream of a late-in-life romance evaporated into the dusty air. For a paralyzing moment, the quiet world of tea and gardening, the world of settled seniors, pulled her back, whispering that some doors are better left unopened. Her life story which had just promised a new chapter, felt like it had been slammed shut again, this time for good. But as she stared at the faded newsprint, something else took root. Cold, hard defiance. The obituary was for his brother, not for Arthur himself. It was a clue, not a conclusion. Hope, stubborn and fierce, surged through her veins. At 70, her life wasn't over. It was just taking an unexpected, terrifying turn. She was no longer just Eleanor, the quiet widow defined by nostalgia. She was a mother searching for her son, a woman determined to finish a chapter that was violently torn from her hands half a century ago. Her 70 years, which sometimes felt like a cage, now felt like armor. She had wisdom, patience, and a small but steady pension. Downstairs, she booted up her old laptop, its modern glow a stark contrast to the secrets held in the attic's handwritten letters. Her fingers, usually reserved for emailing her grandchildren, trembled as she typed Arthur Vance Seacliff Harbor into the search bar. The possibility of reconnecting was no longer a passive wish. It was an active investigation, proving that a life-changing adventure can begin at any age. The initial results were a wash, a sea of common names, old records, and frustrating dead ends. Discouraged, she tried a different approach, searching for the son she never knew. She typed in the name from the photo, Samuel Vance, along with the name of her own small, quiet town. The screen refreshed and a single jarring result appeared. A professional profile for a local historian. Her blood ran cold as she clicked on the image. It wasn't the face of a stranger. It was the kind, familiar face of Mr. Henderson, the man who'd been delivering her groceries every Tuesday for the past 5 years. The face on the screen stared back at her, a paradox of the familiar and the unknown. Mr. Henderson, Samuel, her son. The revelation was so profound, so earth-shattering, that it transcended shock and landed somewhere near absurdity. The man who had carried her groceries, who had once commented on the vibrant color of her hydrangeas, was the living, breathing legacy of her first love. That powerful connection she had relegated to the realm of youthful nostalgia had a name, a job, and a life just a few miles away. The love for Arthur wasn't a memory. It was a man who knew how she took her tea. For an hour she sat in frozen silence, the ghosts of the past and the realities of the present waging war in her quiet living room. 50 years of solitude had taught her to be cautious, to avoid upheaval, but the enduring strength of her feelings for Arthur, reawakened by his handwritten letters, screamed louder than her fear. This wasn't just about a lost love anymore. It was about a stolen future and the fierce primal need to reclaim some piece of it. She realized that the quiet life she had built was a fortress, and its walls had just been breached. She couldn't wait until Tuesday's delivery. The thought was unbearable, fueled by a desperate courage she didn't know she possessed. She grabbed her car keys, her hands shaking so violently she could barely fit the key in the ignition. She wasn't one of the frail seniors her neighbors saw her as. She was a woman on a mission, driven by a love that had refused to die. Every red light, every slow driver was a personal torment, delaying the moment of truth, the terrifying, exhilarating prospect of reconnecting with a piece of her own heart. Finally, she found the address, a modest, well-kept bungalow on a quiet street. She parked across the road, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Through the large picture window, she could see him, Samuel, sitting at a dining table, but he wasn't alone. His back was to her, but seated across from him, bathed in the warm lamplight, was an older man. As he turned his head to speak, Eleanor's breath hitched in her throat, a strangled gasp of disbelief. It was him, older, his hair silvered at the temples, but it was unmistakably Arthur, his eyes still the color of the sea. Time stopped. The 50 years that separated them collapsed into a single, breathless moment. It was Arthur, not a ghost, not a faded memory, but a living, breathing man, a testament to the enduring strength of her first love. The shock was so complete, it felt like a dream, a beautiful, cruel trick of the mind. For a moment, she was 17 again, standing on a windswept pier, promising to wait. And he was there, across the street, the same man who had promised her a lifetime. It seemed destiny, after a long and cruel detour, had finally circled back. She watched them through the window, a family scene she was never meant to be a part of. The quiet life of the town's gentle seniors she'd envied was her own stolen legacy. Her heart ached with a half-century of stolen moments, first steps, birthdays, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. The rage at her mother's betrayal was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a cosmic correction, a sign that some things are just meant to be, no matter how long the universe takes to get it right. But the fear was a paralyzing venom. What could she possibly say? How do you apologize for a silence you didn't even know you were keeping? The man she saw was not just her lost love. He was a stranger, shaped by 5 decades of believing she had abandoned him. The potential for a sweet, late-in life romance was overshadowed by the looming threat of his justified bitterness. Yet, the sight of him, so close, made the thought of driving away an impossible act of self-betrayal, summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed. She got out of the car and walked toward the front door, each step an earthquake in her small world. Her knock echoed in the quiet street. The door opened, and there was Samuel, his face a mask of polite confusion that shifted to alarm as he saw her expression. Then Arthur appeared behind him. His eyes met hers, and the world fell away. The shock on his face was a mirror of her own, but it was his first words, a quiet, gravelly whisper that shattered her completely. "Eleanor," he breathed, his gaze flicking to the old trunk visible in the back of her car. "So, you finally decided to sell my letters." Eleanor's journey began in the quiet dust of an attic, with a single piece of paper that proved the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered. Her story reminds us that a life isn't defined by the chapters that have been written for us, but by the courage it takes to write our own ending, no matter how late in the game it may seam. From a devastating secret to a reunion 50 years in the making, her quest was not just for a lost love, but for a lost self. But the path to healing is paved with impossible questions and the ghosts of what might have been. Now, we turn the final page and ask you, what would you have done in Eleanor's place? After a lifetime of quiet peace, would you have dared to knock on that door, knowing the truth could destroy everything? And what of her mother's choice? Was it a cruel act of betrayal or a desperate, misguided attempt at protection? Think about that single, pivotal moment. Which decision truly changed everything? The one to hide the letters, or the one to finally open them? The past, present, and future of 3 lives rested on that choice. If this story of love, loss, and destiny resonated with you, share it with someone who believes it's never too late for a second chance. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow new sagas and explore the incredible journeys that lie hidden in the quietest of lives.